surrender, humility, nakedness, the raw bones of who we are, that which is left when the veil of protection is pulled away or yielded, given up, surrendered. Surrender, humility, and the nakedness of being. Not an easy path, right? And yet necessary for the one who wants to live in a certain freedom. Surrender terrifies us, terrifies the self, terrifies the one who's resisted, who is in pain, who's suffered, who's built a life of protection, who's built enough walls around their vulnerability to get by, to survive, to thrive, to endure. And the word surrender terrifies that one, understandably. But by and by, with enough cooking, with enough softening, with enough inquiry, with enough healing, with enough attending to the one who had to hide, to undo those patterns, by and by, that surrender, the surrender of the very one who needs to hold on, by and by that starts to become more possible, more desirous, more natural, to start to see clearer and clearer, brings us to the possibility of surrendering that one, the one who needed to fight. That doesn't come suddenly necessarily, or if it does come suddenly, then it still needs to become a lived reality. And that can quite easily bring us to a deeper humility. And humility is probably one of the most powerful words, most powerful doorways that we have when seeking to live a true life, an honest life, a real life, an open life, a loving kind of life. Our humility is what undercuts the ego's defensiveness. Humility is what undercuts the rigidity of the aggrandized ego or the victim ego, the one who stands behind the defenses. Humility, of course, is another doorway that the ego self that we are or have become stuck to. Humility is just another way of saying humiliation of the ego. And the ego, the self, the one we've taken ourselves to be, would avoid humiliation at all costs, because humiliation spells death to the ego. So there we have surrender, which is the worst thing that we can imagine, humility, which is just humiliation in disguise. And why would we do that? But the point being that this is what the softening inevitably leads to. The willingness to surrender the one who needs to fight and defend, and the willingness again to open to the possibility of humility. Which breaks the solidity of the one who doesn't want to feel humiliated. You know, luckily over here in the West now, in many ways, mostly, at least the teachers that I've experienced, come across, know about, aren't wielding the sword of humiliation to humility. I had to go through my own kind of humiliation to humility back in the 90s with my teacher in England, in the UK. And it taught me about the power of how we interpret, and how he had the strength of his beingness to know something about me that I didn't know, and was able to give me just enough rejection, just enough demand, just enough coaxing, just enough heat, and just enough love to take me from the humiliation of the self to the humility of being. It was powerful, and still lives with me, because it opened the door for me to realize that I was living a pretend life in so many ways, a life on the surface. So the surrender began to happen, and the humility began to happen, almost as if by itself, through grace. And this is something that must be welcomed and be courted by the human being if we want to go to the deeper slipstream of authentic living, of authentic being. And we do. That's what we're longing for. But it comes at a cost. It comes at a price. True living comes at a price. If you've seen the Matrix movie, you'll see as Neo relinquishes, gives up, is extricated from the Matrix, from the false world. So then he wakes up to the truth of himself. And at first there's great cost. There's almost heartbreak when he realizes there's no going back, and that the dream is over. The dream of life is over. The dream that he was wrapped up in. And before, this gave him great power, the power of realization, the power of coming home to his true nature. Before that happened, there was a great purification, a great cleansing, a great healing, a great sorrow, a great grief, as he realized that he could never go back. But he also realized he'd been living in a dream. Extremely powerful, very powerful. And so it is for us, because the deeper you go and the more you realize, the more you may see you can no longer live in the dream of yourself and the dream of the world, because your heart is burning and crying for something more authentic, for authenticity. But in order to live in authenticity, you have to give up the dream. And the movement, the journey, does involve some grief, some recognition, some sorrow, some compassion. And you can't fake that, though you can try, but it doesn't really make any difference. The faker is suffering just as much as the dreamer. But if this is what calls you, you know, you have to be prepared for the surrender, and you have to be prepared for the humility. And we have to choose it somehow for ourselves, at least embrace the possibility. Bless you.